right, well, it's the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to the StorTrends Virtual Lunch and Learn. My name is Tyler Newberry. I'll be your host and moderator for the event today. With me today is Senior Account Executive Todd Chidoba and Solutions Engineer George Rodriguez for the demo portion of the presentation. We'll be getting started momentarily with that, but just want to go over a few quick things before we got started. Number one relates to the pizza delivery. If you are expecting a pizza delivery, meaning you filled out the registration form and requested a pizza, then that delivery should be arriving now if it hasn't already. Sometimes the delivery person does run a few minutes behind, so if your pizza has not arrived by 1:10 or 1:15 Eastern Time, somewhere around there, shoot us an email so that we can kind of look into it and figure out what's going on. The email to reach us at is tylerin@ami.com. I've also listed that in the chat window, so you should be able to view it there. If you guys do have any questions, please email tylerin@ami.com. For folks on the West Coast, your pizza will be arriving at 11 a.m. Pacific time, as that is the earliest that your restaurant's open. Number two, we want to make this as much of an interactive experience as we can. So if you guys do have questions during the event, please feel free to shoot those over via the Q&A communicator located at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and we'll either get to your question live on air or, if time permits, or we'll shoot you an answer back via email later on. And finally, if we do have any technical difficulties today, we just ask that you please be patient. Sometimes the screen can become grainy or the audio become a little bit muffled for a second, but usually the problems resolve themselves within just a couple of minutes. So again, if we do have any technical difficulties, just appreciate your guys' patience there. That's all I've got for the boring stuff. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Todd for part one of the presentation today.
All right, very good. I appreciate that, Tyler. This is Todd Chidoba. I'm a Senior Sales Executive for the Channel Sales Division here at American Megatrends. Today we're here to talk about StorTrends and really kind of the architecture across the storage landscape today in regards to different approaches to storage, whether it be all spinning, hybrid, or all flash arrays that are out there. A little bit about me. I've been with American Megatrends for 25 years, so I've actually worn a number of different hats in the company, most of which has been in an engineering scope, and I've been on the storage end here for about the last 10 and on the sales side for probably about the last 8. So I've seen a lot of stuff that we've got, and we'll talk about a few of those products as we go. I'm also joined by George Rodriguez. He's been with AMI for 6 years or something like that. He's spent the majority of the time with the StorTrends team, but also in some of the other channel products that we've got, which we'll touch on that at the end of the presentation. But aside from all that, we'll go ahead and get started here. We're basically going to go through a presentation here, talk to you a little bit about who AMI is, where StorTrends got its start from. And we'll start getting into the landscape of the storage industry and talk about the different architectures that make up the industry today. Then we'll get into a little bit more about what the, some of the nuts and bolts about what StorTrends brings to the table, talk a little bit about what our support does and our approach to support. At which point I'll turn the table over to George. He'll give us a kind of a glimpse at the UI for the StorTrends 2610 all-flash array. And, of course, it says at the end, summary and QA. Obviously, like Tyler said, we like to keep it interactive. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, certainly don't hesitate to go ahead and shoot those over, and we'll address those as we can. All right, so first off, an introduction as to who AMI is. A lot of folks, if you've ever heard of AMI BIOS, that is us. We've been in business since 1985. Of course, BIOS has been the mainstay of AMI and continues to be so today throughout through the entire time, of course, including today as well. We do have a worldwide presence with sales offices, basically around the world. We are headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. That is where George and I both sit. So this is we'll touch base on a little bit more about why that's important as we move forward as well. We do have about 1,500 employees worldwide. We are very much an engineering company, and more than 80% of our employees do work at an engineering capacity throughout the world. So we do have a number of different products that we've been very successful in. We've primarily been an OEM type of a company, and we'll touch base on some of those in the next couple of slides. But through the success we've had in these different product divisions, we actually ship in over half the computers in the world today, which, you know, if you stop and think about that, that's a pretty astounding achievement to boast about there. Again, we are very much an engineering-focused company. We do have over 375 company patents across the different product lines that we've got, but over 125 of those are actually surrounding our storage IP as well. So, you know, that's you know, obviously an important role when it comes to talking about where we are from a storage perspective. Clearly, you know, through the different product lines, we do ship in billions of products around the world. Obviously, if we're shipping in half the computers in the world, then, you know, it's pretty easy to achieve that number. Of course, our mission statement you'll see there is providing our customers with the highest quality products the first time, every time. So, a lot of you folks, if you see the screen here, might recognize that logo. If you're as old as I am, you remember watching your screen boot up and watching all of your memory post, and, you know, you would always see this logo there. That is us. We are that old BIOS company. Again, we started the company in 1985, and AMI BIOS being, of course, the you know, our flagship product from day one. Obviously, that's still our number one product division. You know, obviously those are going to, you know, lend themselves to, you know, servers, storage arrays, desktops, embedded systems, thin clients, notebooks, etc. So, obviously, when people hear about AMI, this is what we're most known for. Clearly, something that we've been extremely successful in throughout our experience. Another area that we may not, that we're very much a product leader in, but a lot of people may not recognize it as much in, but remote access controllers. We've got a product division called MegaRAID. Basically, this is going to be for all of your IPMI, your remote KVM, you know, those types of remote access to your servers and storage arrays, etc. So if you're familiar with products such as, you know, like a HP ILO or a Dell DRAC, those are actually the IP that we sold to those guys, so it's actually the working program that's under the hood there that's actually allowing for those types of devices to operate. Yeah, we've been in remote access controllers since the mid-90s, and again, that's one of our huge staples with AMI today. An area that we've been very successful with, but has been a little bit under the hood for a while. If anybody remembers, back a few years back in the mid-90s, there was a MegaRAID controller, or a RAID controller called the MegaRAID card. This is actually our product line. This was the #1 RAID controller card in the world. This was recognized by the Gartner Magic Quadrant as being the #1 RAID vendor in the world at the time. Moving forward to, you know, the end of the last century, and of course the beginning of the 2000s, it just made more sense for that technology to really move down to silicone and turn that into an ASIC that you could actually put on board. AMI is a software company. We don't have foundries and silicone and all of that stuff, so it really made business sense for us to go ahead and sell that business unit off at the time. So in 2001, we actually sold the MegaRAID division off to LSI Logic, and they, of course, continued the success of the MegaRAID controller card for a number of years, and I think they've since sold it off to Avago Tech. But that product is still out there, and again, at the root of what all of that product is, comes from American Megatrends. After the sale in 2001, of course, as you can imagine, we had a non-compete that we had to enter in with to stay out of storage for a number of years. So basically, after after 4 years, I believe is what the non-compete was, we actually brought back that same core development team, and they started writing the code for what is now StorTrends. So StorTrends is our product division, is our storage product division. We are not, just some ZFS-based product that we bought a chassis and put a bezel on and called ourselves a storage company. This is actually our IP. We've got over 125 patents surrounding the different technologies that we've got inside of the StorTrends product. What I'm showing here is basically our current lineup in the product family. Of course, we started writing the code back a little bit earlier than this. We did have an OEM play for a little while where we had what we called the direct OEM model, where we were writing very specific code for very specific needs, whether it be pharmaceutical or security or whatnot, that we were doing for a long time. Of course, as the years progressed, we saw a number of acquisitions in the storage industry where it really limited our abilities in the OEM market there. So it made sense for us to go out to the channel. So we've been out in the channel now for a number of years. Again, what we've got on the screen here is our current product lineup. So back in 2007 or so, we actually introduced our dual controller 3400. This is basically our all-spinning array. Fast forward a number of years, obviously we start seeing SSDs become a little more accessible, a little more affordable. That's, of course, when we saw the emergence of the hybrid arrays. In the last couple of years, we've been focusing, of course, on all-flash arrays and, of course, performance. So we've actually got a couple of iterations of the all-flash array, or I should say that the 2610 is our current one. The 3610 was our first adoption of all-flash, and we'll get into what those differences were as we actually move forward here. So, of course, a lot of people ask the question, well, where does StorTrends fit? Where are your customer verticals, et cetera? At the end of the day, we're a storage company, so, obviously, as a lot of you folks in the audience probably would reflect, we are going to actually touch on pretty much any vertical that's out there. We are, we've got deployments around the world. We've got, thousands of installs now. We're going to pretty much hit any vertical out there, which include education, finance, healthcare, manufacturing, retail, service providers, small enterprise. Of course, we do a lot in the government and the public sector as well. So, again, being a storage provider, we're pretty much going to lend ourselves to whatever vertical that is out there. What we've got here is really just a small cross-section of what our customer base is. Obviously, we're not going to go through and talk about every customer that we've got, but obviously, this kind of shows the landscape of where we are, and of course, it's going to reflect the different verticals that I had mentioned in the previous slide. Again, we do have thousands of installs worldwide. One of the things that I guess is important to bring up here is that we do primarily play in the SMB to SME market, which also would kind of equate to the local governments as well as some federal agencies as well. So that's pretty much where we play. Now, of course, well, why is it that you guys are going to come and attend an event like this and understand what it is that we're talking about? And there's obviously a number of challenges that we face in our storage systems these days. A lot of which are going to be performance related. Some of which are going to be growth related. Of course, high latency. This is especially in the world of SSDs and the adoption of SSDs. Definitely come because of high latencies that are experienced. So obviously, you start getting into not being able to serve the demand that all of your users have, so you end up with poor user environments and application timeouts, and of course people just aren't exactly happy when things like that occur. VDI projects, this is certainly an emerging area that certainly has been around for a while, but again, with the emergence of SSDs and all-flash arrays, VDI products or VDI projects are certainly becoming much more prevalent in the industry today. I do want to mention, and of course I'll mention it again towards the at the end of the slide deck here. Another product that we've got in our channel lineup is a VDI product called Snap VDI. Basically, this is a VDI product in a box. So basically, it encompasses all of your compute, storage, all the way out to your endpoint devices, all in a single package. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but we'll touch a little bit more on that at the end of the slide deck. But anyways, VDI projects certainly are something that push the the storage discussion as well. Primarily when it comes to the performance and how to supply the demand for VDI. Other areas that bring people to an event such as this, storage upgrades. Of course, that's very common for our systems start getting older, a little bit slower. You need to get a little more up to date or refresh the hardware that you're utilizing. Capacity issues. As I mentioned before, I've been here for 25 years. Companies kind of operate the way we do individually. If you saw my inbox, I've got emails that probably date older than where most people have actually worked at companies. So as you can understand, capacity obviously grows. People don't want to get rid of anything. Everybody wants to keep everything. So of course that's going to lead to capacity issues. Oftentimes we'll get a new product, or we'll acquire another company or something like that. So you've got a new build out happening that's going to require additional storage. Oftentimes people come to events like this just because they really just want to know what's out there in the industry. So when there is a need that does arise, they'll know what's out there and they'll know who to call and who to contact and understand the different technologies that are out there. I like to put this last one on there. This is kind of a joke that we'd like to add on there. Oftentimes, obviously after an event such as this, we'll reach out with emails or calls to find out, if there was any follow-up questions or anything that we could help out with. And I contacted a guy about a year ago after doing an event like this, and he responded to me, or I was just like, hey, is there anything I can help out with? And the guy was just really honest with me, and he was like, Todd, you're offering me a free pizza, and I was not going to turn that down, so I'm just here for the free pizza. So if you fit in that category, that's fine. I hope that you enjoy your pizza. Maybe you'll learn a little bit of something while we're going through the presentation, and when you do have a storage need arise, maybe you'll keep us in mind. So if you're here for the pizza, enjoy, and stay tuned. So, all right, moving a little bit forward here, we're going to talk a little bit more about the landscape and the different architectures that make up the storage industry today. Obviously, some of these technologies date back a little bit further than others, but at the end of the day, all of these different architectures still play a role in our environments today. Basically, these are going to outline the same products that we've got in the StorTrends product family today. So the first one is going to be an all-spinning disk array. That's going to be for us, it's our 3400. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of magic that goes into this. This is really just trying to stack spindles to achieve the amount of capacity that you need. Obviously with the different RAID sets and the different disk types, we can hit different performance benchmarks, but obviously there's more efficient ways of doing that as we move forward into stuff like the hybrid arrays. So, while we do have tiering and stuff like that so that we can have different performance earmarks and capacity needs for different stuff in the spinning arrays, our hybrid array is definitely designed to be able to deliver much higher performance to very specific volumes and whatnot. So basically one thing you're going to see, it's a common thread throughout our different architectures, that we are leaning on tiering to really make for the most efficient architecture that you possibly can have. So again, with our hybrid, basically what we're doing is we're providing you caching as well as tiering on SSDs, and then we're backfilling our 3U 16-bay chassis with spinning drives so that we can actually provide the amount of capacity needs that you've got as well. We do have volume pinning and different performance metrics that we could put on your different volumes. So if you've got volumes that you don't want to touch your SSD space, we can pin those just down to the spinning array or to the spinning drives. That way you're allowing for more space on the SSDs. One of the things that we do a little bit different than what a lot of the different the other hybrid vendors provide, we're actually providing caching as well as tiering on the SSDs. And that's obviously going to allow for us to utilize our disk space much more efficiently while still providing the most amount of performance as possible. Obviously, we've got a hot tier and a cold tier model that fits into this. And this is also going to feed into what we're doing for an all-flash array. Obviously, all-flash is going to be pretty self-explanatory. Now you've got a disk shelf that's going to be full of all SSD drives. Again, we do still follow a tiering model, and I'm going to touch base and get into more of the nuts and bolts as to what we're doing in that tiering in a couple slides moving forward. But really, at the end of the day, these are the different architectures that pretty much make up the landscape of the storage industry, regardless of who the vendor is. Here's really kind of just an eye chart, really. I'm not going to go into everything that's here. It's really just laying out what our different models are, the different hardware that's utilized within them. Obviously, what we've got, the 34 and 3500 are 3U 16-bay models. Our 2610, which is our latest all-flash, that is a 2U 24-bay. That's what the 2 would demarcate for the name there. But again, 3400 all spinning, 3500 hybrid with a mix of SSDs as well as spinning drives, and then of course our 2610, which is our all-flash array. And I'll mention the 3610 when I start getting into the technology on the 2610, and you'll understand the differences of what those guys were. All right, so we've got all these different architectures. What's the big, where does each of these fit? Why is it that we've got these different architectures, and what differences are they going to bring to the table? Obviously performance is going to be the name of the game when it comes to the differences in these guys. What we've got here is a comparison of where our latency performance is between the different arrays. Now, in this particular thing, we're not doing a comparison to other vendors that are out there. This is really just outlining what the different architectures do and how you're going to see better performance out of the different types of products. So that top red line that you see there represents the 3400 all spinning array. And what you're seeing is that you're going to see that latency really bouncing all over the place, and it's really going to get pretty high at times. We're probably averaging somewhere around the 18 to 20 millisecond range as far as just an average goes. For you guys that are running your virtual environments out there, understand that you start getting into above 20 milliseconds, you start getting into VM disconnects and whatnot, and obviously that's not an efficient way of running your enterprise. So you start looking for alternatives and start getting into different architectures to accommodate better latencies. So that brings into play some of the hybrid arrays. So that's the green line that's in the middle, and obviously you're seeing that latency really go down. So obviously what we're seeing in the beginning of this time frame is the latencies are a little bit higher, and as we continue to go forward, those latencies kind of flatten out a little bit. They become a little bit lower, they become a little bit more consistent. And basically what that is as tiering kind of starts taking over, and you start seeing your block accesses start to normalize, we're able to actually get those flattened out that way, because the reason being is that we're actually serving more of your I/O out of the SSD space rather than the I/O bouncing around and us not knowing where those blocks are. So if you go down to the bottom line, that's that light blue line that's at the bottom, and that's where our all-flash array is going to come in. So this is, obviously what we're seeing here is a delivery of I/O at a much, much lower latency rate. So, even with the hybrid, we're still probably averaging around, 5 or 6 milliseconds. With the all-flash array, we're talking about being sub 1 millisecond here. Again, kind of, what's the difference between all of these? Of course, back, when we were all playing in the all-spinning world, the measure for performance, of course, was always IOPS, IOPS, IOPS. And obviously, what did we have to do? We were, doing RAID 10s with 15,000 RPM drives, and then you just tried to stack as many spindles together to achieve the IOPS. And that worked as far as achieving IOPS, but the problem is that our latency is where we were still getting huge bottlenecks. Obviously, with the advent of the SSDs and those becoming more popular in the offerings that were out there, IOPS were easy to achieve. When a single disk can hit 25, 50,000 IOPS or more, that's no longer the issue. So this is where latency really becomes a really important part of what our infrastructures need to be. And obviously, as you can see from this chart, you can get the most efficient delivery of your I/O through the all-flash array. So obviously, a big part of where am I going to fit into this is obviously where does the price point come in here? We've got a tool on StorTrends.com. It's called our price quote generator, and what this will allow you to do is kind of give us a little bit of information as far as what it is that you're looking for, what kind of capacity you have, if you know your IOPS, what you're trying to achieve, what types of interfaces are you utilizing? Do you know your read-write ratios? What kind of applications that you're utilizing? Obviously, you give us a little bit of an overview as to what you've got, and we can generate some ballpark configurations and price points so that you can gauge, hey, I'd like to have that all-flash array, but is that really in my budget? I mean, obviously, we'd all like to drive a Ferrari, but we may not have the purse strings to actually pay for one. So, obviously, price quote generator and where our budget falls, obviously, is the starting point as to where we're talking about as far as the different architectures that we're reviewing. All right, that being said, let's go ahead and step into a little bit more of what the nuts and bolts are of StorTrends. There's quite a bit of information on this particular slide. One of the things I like to point out in this slide is that while a lot of our discussion today is really surrounding performance and all flash and the different architectures, one of the things that I like to point out at some point in our slide deck here is we are a full-fledged, a fully enterprise-class storage array. So we're not just, filling a chassis full of, high-performance drives and selling it as a storage array. We've got a number of feature sets that are built into each of our StorTrends devices. Obviously, some products are going to have some of the features that others don't, but by and large, they're all going to have, all of your snapshot capabilities. We've got a lot of replication capabilities that are built into our products. A nice thing about what we do in replication, is that we're able to actually mix and match different boxes within the product family between your primary and DR location. So if you've got that high performance demand at your primary facility, we can have that all flash array that's giving you the performance and everything that you need, but you may not necessarily need all of that type of performance at your DR location where it's essentially an insurance policy, if you will. So you could have that all spinning array back at that DR location, and obviously that makes it a little bit more budget friendly to get into DR. We've got a number of other features built that are baked into the replication piece to really utilize the bandwidth that you've got, so you don't have to really invest in higher bandwidth because we've got, WAN optimization tools to really overcome the overhead that's inherent to TCP over LAN. But again, those are just a few of the things that we bring in here that makes us the enterprise class full-featured box. Something else to point out is we do have an all-inclusive feature set. So all of the different features that we're talking about here actually come out of the box at a single price point. We're not going to, when you get a quote from us, you're not going to see, 30, 40, 50 line items that are going to outline, all of the different features that you're paying for. And, a year down the line, you don't want to, you're not going to decide that, hey, you want to start taking snapshots. We're not going to have our hand out to turn on, some feature set that you didn't pay for up front. You're paying for everything up front. Everything we've got comes out of the box ready to go. With our 2610, we're going to start talking about dedupe and compression. So obviously that's going to start getting into the efficiency of the space that we do have on the tier, on the SSD drives. We do have cold and hot tiers, so that way we're going to manage the performance and capacity savings that we're going to get from both of those. The inlet cache is where we're really going to see the mechanism of how we're utilizing these hot and cold tiers and making sure that we're delivering the best performance as well as endurance for the drives inside of the array. We do have over 100 or so configurations for basically each of the products that we've got in the product family. And we do this because obviously everybody's environment is not, everybody's environment is a little bit different. We've all got our different fingerprints. Some folks might have a much higher, read-write ratio than somebody else. So obviously being able to tailor a configuration to your actual needs is certainly a big benefit, and we're not going to try and shoehorn you into a configuration that may not fit what it is that you're trying to achieve. Again, we are an all-inclusive feature set. Obviously, VMware integration to not only VMware, but we also have integration into, Hyper-V and Citrix and everybody else out there as well. We certainly understand that if you're not playing with, those guys, then, obviously you're not taking storage seriously anyways. Performance, obviously superior latency reduction, as we talked about in the previous slide. We'll get into the dedupe and compression here, but that's, depending on how much compression and dedupe we can get, we can actually get into all-flash arrays that are going to be somewhere close to that 50 cents a gig area. Obviously, where does that lend itself as far as applications go? Clearly, we're going to play well in high-performance databases, mixed workloads. Again, there's that VDI term again. Obviously, virtual environments is going to play very well into our all-flash arrays. All right, so dedupe and compression. This is obviously where we start seeing a big difference between some of the different architectures that are out there. So dedupe and compression, obviously, what does that mean? We're going to, if we've got multiple copies of the same blocks, we're only going to maintain one copy of it, thus taking up less physical space on your actual drives. In our environments, we generally will see a 4-to-1 data reduction between the dedupe and compression between, with all your incoming I/O. So what does that mean? Obviously, that means if you've got 40 terabytes of actual physical space, you don't necessarily have to purchase 40 terabytes of all flash, because as we start getting into pricing, you would see that SSD obviously space does come at a premium compared to spinning drives. So obviously, as much as we can reduce that footprint, the better off we could be. So when we get talking about 4-to-1, obviously, if you've got 40 terabytes of actual space, we'd actually only need to purchase about 10 terabytes of actual disk space. So obviously, that's a huge savings from from a capacity perspective and obviously price perspective. With all of that and providing a 4-to-1, we're still achieving over 120,000 IOPS. We're still seeing that sub 1 millisecond latency. Again, our read and our hot and cold tier is going to be very important when we talk about what we're doing here. So basically, what we've got is a 2U 24-bay chassis. We've got 8 of the drives are going to be dedicated to what we're calling our hot tier, and then we've got 14 drives that are going to be dedicated to your cold tier. In the middle of that, we've got a couple of drives that are going to be dedicated to cache. And basically what we're doing is all of your incoming I/O, we're going to serve that, or your I/O meaning whether it be a read or a write, we're trying to maintain as much of that on your hot tier as possible. As blocks get older, less access, what we're going to do is going to demote those down to what our cold tier is. And basically what we're doing is on our hot tier, we don't have anything to encumber the performance that's going to happen there. So we've got no dedupe, we've got no compression at all on those first 8 drives. And obviously, the reason being is I don't care what anybody tells you, and I don't care what vendor it is, anytime that you're introducing dedupe and compression into your I/O stream, you are talking about having an overhead that will cause some performance hits there as far as the max capabilities of the SSDs that are there. So obviously what we're trying to do And that was something that we actually learned when we were doing our 3610, which was our first foray into all flash. We were doing all of our incoming I/O, all of it in line was being deduped and compressed. While still providing a lot of performance, it wasn't as peak of a performance as possible. So basically, we decided that we're going to get the best of both worlds. We're going to get as high as performance as possible with our hot tier. And then, of course, what we're doing is once we demote down to the cold tier, we're actually going to put those blocks through our dedupe and compression engine. And actually, the blocks that are on the back end or on that cold tier are actually going to be deduped and compressed, thus allowing for the most capacity savings as possible out of those drives. Now, what happens if you go back and you start accessing those cold blocks? What we're going to do is we're going to see those, and we're going to actually start, that first hit would come through the dedupe and compression engine, which again, you're still getting SSD performance. It'll be very highly performing, but then we're going to recognize that we're going to actually start serving that I/O from our caching layer. And the reason we're doing that is we're trying to avoid, constant promotion and demotion of blocks. So what we're going to do is we're going to monitor the usage of those blocks that we recently touched that were from that cold tier. And we're going to make sure, hey, is this just an anomaly? We only touched this once, and then we're going to leave it alone. If that's the case, we'll commit whatever changes back to that cold tier, and we'll call that done. If we see that those blocks are continuing to be accessed, then we'll go ahead and promote that back up to that hot tier, and that way we're going to be giving you all the performance as possible. Obviously, doing this is giving us the best performance to all of your active data, and it also gives us a lot of endurance that's going to allow for, actually what we're doing is providing a 5-year endurance guarantee on all of our drives. So in-lift cache is the name of that feature that allows us to get that performance, capacity, and endurance out of our all-flash arrays. So obviously we've got a lot of similar type of methodology in how we're going about our different arrays. Obviously, what array fits best for what it is that you're trying to do. Obviously, not obviously, the question is going to come down to, how much capacity savings can I get? The truth is not all I/O or not all data is going to lend itself particularly well to dedupe and compression. A lot of user files, this and that, where you've already got compressed and deduped data, you're not going to see huge amounts of data reduction. There's a lot of databases. There's obviously you start getting into VDI, stuff like that, virtual environments. These are going to lend themselves extremely well to really good data compaction, and that's obviously where we're going to start seeing the price per gig come down when we're actually able to achieve the maximum amount of data compaction as possible. So how do I know which one of these is what we need to do? We've got a great tool. This is another download off of our StorTrends.com. This is an environment analysis tool that we call IData. This is a free tool to download, and basically what this is you download the tool. If you're running a virtual environment, you would install it at the host level. And basically, if you're trying to identify, well, what storage needs do I have, or what storage needs are my servers actually utilizing in my current environment. Basically, what we would do is, from the host layer, we'd point to all the VMs that we're interested in, or all the VMs in your infrastructure, and all we're going to do is gather the metrics that are natively being gathered by VMware to begin with. And we're going to put them into a nice, neat package. So basically what we're going to do, it's really easy to set up. Again, it's free to download, it's free to run. After 7 days is our typical run. It'll spit out a file. You'll send the file to us. We'll put together a nice, colorful report for you, and then we'll go over the report with you. It's going to give you an overview of all of the servers that were being monitored. Going to give us a good idea what your capacity usage is, what your read and write ratios were. It's going to help us identify, well, how much hot data do you have? What's your network utilization? Obviously, this is going to give us just a really good overview of not only the overview of all of your servers that we're watching in one big report, but we're also going to break down each and every VM and server that we're monitoring individually as well. This is a fantastic tool for you guys to help identify what your environment is actually doing. There's a number of times we get on discovery calls with customers, and there's a lot of answers that they don't have. What are my read-write ratios? And a lot of folks don't know that information. It's a great tool to learn about your own infrastructure. Obviously, for us, this is a great way for us to make sure that whatever configurations we're talking about actually makes sense for your environment. So this really takes the guesswork out of what your environment requires and what your configuration should be for your data set. So again, free to download, free to run, free to get the report. StorTrends.com, I believe it's under resources. You'll find the IData tool. All right, one last thing I really want to touch on. I'm kind of hogging all the time here before I get this over to George. I want to talk a little bit about our support. American Megatrends has been in business for 30-something years now. Obviously, through the different products that we've got and the length of time we've been doing this, we certainly recognize the importance of support. We're very realistic. I'm not going to claim that we don't have an issue from time to time. The question is, of course, is not if you have an issue, it's how you handle an issue when one does come up. And obviously, this is something that we take extremely important. I mentioned early on in the slide deck, we are based, our headquarters for American Megatrends is in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where George and I sit. This is not just, a sales and marketing leg of American Megatrends. This is actually where the core development team for StorTrends actually sits. Our entire support team actually sits here in Atlanta. When you call our 24/7 support line, you're actually getting one of our engineers answer the phone. You're not going to get, number one, it's ringing here in Atlanta, so we're not going through some call service that's located God knows where in the world that you may or may not have language barriers. You're actually going to call here. You're not talking to an operator who's going to tell you someone's going to call you back in, some amount of time. You're actually going to get one of our guys on the phone when you call. That obviously allows us to, supply the best amount of the best support possible when you call in and give you the fastest response time that you're going to find in the industry, really. We take a little bit of a different approach as well. We like to have assign accounts to different support team members. So when you do call in, and you're going to find that you're talking to very familiar people who are familiar with your configuration and are going to be familiar with what it is that you're doing. So you're not going to have to call in and re-explain that you've got such and such a VMs and this this is going on and that's going on. Someone's going to be familiar with what's going on. So we're going to be able to get to the crux of your call as fast as humanly possible. Again, our phone support, our standard support is 24/7. Next business day on-site part replacement. We do provide 4-hour on-site for same-day support if that's required. Obviously, all of the components that we've got across all of the products in the family are going to be, all hot swappable. So really, 4-hour while it's available. We can do replacement kits that, of course, would just give you anything that you need to just replace something at that moment anyways. Everything we provide is dual controller, so we do have no downtime firmware upgrades. Running in an active passive configuration, you would just upgrade the passive controller, fail over your I/O to that controller, upgrade the original controller, obviously. Then it's going to have everything up and running without you having downtime. That being said, it's still obviously good practice to be scheduling maintenance windows to do this. Along with our basic support package called StorAid, we actually allow for our support team to receive email alerts from your system. This is a really nice thing that we have that allows another set of eyes to be on your system, and somebody that can make sure that everything is running as smoothly as possible at all times. This is a really great tool over the weekend. You're watching the game. some drive fails or something like that, our team's going to actually see this. Oftentimes we'll start an RMA process before a customer is even aware of something like that going on. I mentioned before with the different technology we've got, we actually have a 5-year endurance guarantee on our SSDs as long as you're under a support plan. Our support terms range are 1, 3, and 5 year. We can do year over year as we're going. Just depends on how your accounting practices are and what makes the most sense for you guys. Last thing I promise, and then I'll turn it over to George. Again, another product that's in the channel family that we've got here is Snap VDI. What this is it really is taking a lot of the guesswork out of deploying a VDI environment. This is going to be a standalone, serving nothing but your VDI users. So this is going to have your compute, it's going to have your storage, it's going to have everything out to your endpoint 0 clients. Obviously, all the manageability tools to manage all of your users, all of the user pools, all of the endpoint devices. All of this is going to come in one package. We're going to be able to provide you everything, including all of your licenses, all in one packages that really takes the guesswork out of scoping your VDI and deploying a VDI project. Obviously, if you've got any questions about that, we'll be following up with everybody after the event, so if you have any additional questions at all or you want to learn a little bit more about what Snap VDI is all about, obviously let us know. We'd be happy to talk to you a little bit more about that. All right, that being said, I hope I didn't take up too much of your time, George. I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to him, let him give you a good look at what the 2610 UI looks like and what StorTrends looks like.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Hey guys, hope you've enjoyed everything so far. Like Todd said, I'm going to be showing you a quick little rundown of our UI here. Before I get started here, I want to say, if you want to take a deeper look into the UI, or if you have extra questions here that I don't cover in this quick overview, you can of course give us a call. We'll schedule an in-depth demo, to really dig into all of this and the different feature sets as well. So here we go. So I'm connected actually to Chrome right now. I just went full screen so we could see a little bit better, but it is a web-based UI based on HTML5. You can use whatever web browser you want, put in an IP that's configured on the SAN, and off you go. So let's go ahead and jump in here. And one of the things you'll see when we first log in is the very first thing actually is going to be two important pieces of information. The very top here is your capacity information and how that dedeep and compression engine are running on the system. How efficient is it currently being? You can see here, currently I have about a 4.3 to 1 ratio. Down right below it in the next section, we have a section where we show you capacities both pre-dedupe and post-dedupe. So the top half here is pre-dedupe, so if the system did not have any dedupe or compression technology in it, you can see here I'm using about 2 terabytes almost. I would need 2 terabytes physically on the unit to store that data, and that 2 terabytes is what your servers are actually utilizing. But you can see here I have this little bar that kind of connects back down to the bottom half here. And this is what's after dedupe and compression, what's physically on the drives currently. You can see here I have about 470 gigs or so actually on the drives. Everything else is just a pointer and a hash table for dedupe and compression. Excuse me. But you can see I have about 3 terabytes of physical capacity that I have available to me on this system. That is after RAID, after OS overhead, after all that. I have about 3 terabytes of usable capacity. Based on my current dedupe rate, I should be able to achieve 13 terabytes out of that. On the right side here, here's how much we have free to continue utilizing. As this number updates, which it will update every 20 seconds, as it updates, you can kind of see that these numbers will reflect that update as well, so that at any given point you can look in here and you can see exactly how much you should expect capacity-wise out of your system. The next section here is the events and the smart information. a lot of times things start happening on the system. It could be a hardware failure, it could be a performance issue. Maybe latency's going up, maybe capacities. You're hitting the top end there on your current capacity. All of those kind of things will pop up here. So as soon as you log in, you're immediately aware. You can start taking whatever steps are needed to alleviate whatever the issue might be. The smart information, we keep track of all the smart info on all of the drives. Specifically, what we're looking for is the endurance levels of the drives. With an SSD, you can technically read from it forever, but you do have a limited number of writes on that. So as the writes start hitting the drives and that endurance level goes down, we keep track of all of that, and once it reaches 20% of endurance remaining, we'll actually go ahead and replace that drive proactively, kind of, to stay ahead of that. We also keep track of all the temperature on the system, from the drive perspective, from the total chassis perspective, what have you, to make sure that, you're not getting too hot. We can replace the drive, we can replace a fan, whatever the issue might be. The next big section here in the UI is our performance section. And what we see here is, for the system overall, what's our latency, what's our current IOPS, what's our current throughput. The charts to the left show you the last 2 hours worth of information, and they update every 20 seconds. And you can actually hover over them to kind of see, what was happening at different points of time. We do break all of these down between reads and writes, so you can kind of see what, what's happening there. To the right, we have our instantaneous values, which is the last update, 20 seconds ago or however long ago. And then we also have the average for the last hour. So you can kind of see, on average, what have you been doing for the last hour and what are you currently doing as well. Down in the last section here is the I/O size distribution and the read-write ratio. Read-write ratio, very straightforward. That's, it is what it is, right? Just kind of give you an idea of, what your ratio actually is. The I/O size distribution, that's a little more cryptic in how you might actually look at it. But basically, the smaller block sizes, and really about 32K is kind of the threshold there. Anything below 32K is probably going to be more random in nature. And so we want to make sure that you're getting the proper IOPS out of the system. And, if you're getting some sort of latency issue, it might be something to do with some configuration there at some point, and, we can figure that out. The bigger block sizes, those are going to be more sequential in nature, and so actually you just really care about the available bandwidth at that point. And so, based on what your ratios are, we can see if, we need to focus in on how the drives are performing or how the network is performing. So, if we go back up to the top, we have another tab up here. Like I said, this first section is for the system overall. We also have a tab so we can see things at a per volume basis. You can see here I'm very original with my volume names, V1 through 16. But the more important thing here is this table shows you a listing of all your volumes on the system. It gives you information on capacity as well as performance metrics. But then if you click around, you'll notice the charts down here on the bottom. They will refresh as well. And for whatever reason, it's taking a minute here. But let me see if I can click around to another one and if it'll come up better. Well, maybe not. But these charts here, they show you basically the exact same information that we were seeing in the overall section, but at a per volume basis. So not only can you see what's going on for all of your volumes, but overall, but you can see specifically what each volume is doing. So maybe one volume needs a little extra attention. We can easily decipher that from looking in this section here. And actually, there it goes. So you can kind of see, what's going on per volume as well. The next section that I'd like to go to is the hardware health section. And I'll touch on this just briefly here if it'll come up. But basically with the hardware health section, we're looking at the hardware aspects of the unit. So you can see here we have a physical representation of the unit in the middle. And then we have statistics on CPU memory utilization and network utilization for each controller on the left and the right, respectively. We are active passive by default in our configuration, so you can kind of see the CPU and the memory utilization is higher on the left control than the right, and that's simply why. But down here in the middle, you can hover over the different aspects, the motherboard, the fans, things like that, to kind of see what's going on from a physical perspective. You can actually hover over the drives themselves as well. You can kind of see what's going on with them. You can see, actually, I have these bars on the individual drives. These guys kind of blink that first blue every now and then. But these guys are all the way up into the red. And they're kind of like heat bars, basically, showing you how much I/O is going to a particular drive at any given point. And so for reference, the ones on the ends, that is the drives that I'm using for my hot tier. And so obviously that is where I want a majority of my I/O to go in this particular case. We can flip this guy over, and you can kind of see what's going on the back of the unit as well. You can see, the current status of the power supplies, your individual interfaces, what's their IP, what's their speed, what's their status, things like that. So at any given point, though, if any of these things have some sort of issue, maybe a power supply has failed or something like that, you can take a quick peek here, and then when you go physically onto the unit to replace that part, as an example, you kind of already have an idea of where it is, so you can get that squared away easily enough. One last thing that I'm going to show you guys here is our volume creation wizard. So aside from just managing and just making sure everything's running correctly and all of that, what else are you going to do on this system? Obviously, you're going to create your volumes so you can present them to your servers, so you can actually use the capacity on the system. So we have a wizard for that to try to make it as easy and simple as possible. And so you choose your storage pool. By default, there's just the one. And for some reason, live demos, there's nothing like them, right? So hopefully the next page here comes up in just a second. But I'll go ahead and start talking about it while it tries to decide to load. And really what we're doing with this wizard is making it as simple as possible to deploy those volumes. We ask you for a name of the volume, what kind of capacity you want to give the volume, and which tier you want it to be in. By that I mean hot or cold tier, of course, like we've been talking about. And if you say, all right, let me see if I can give it another second to come up. But by that I mean, if you choose the hot tier, basically the volume will have access into the hot tier. That doesn't necessarily mean that the entire volume will live there. Whereas if you were to choose cold, it would mean you wouldn't have access into the hot tier at all. The reason you would do that is maybe a backup volume or just something that's not as here we go. That's not as pertinent as some of your other volumes. But you can, as I was saying, we can do test vol 99, right? I don't know. I'll make this one 7 terabytes. Like I said, high and low, I'll keep it as high there. And if you're going to be adding this volume into a cluster, you can make sure that all of those nodes can log in concurrently. You hit add to list, you go through that process for as many volumes as you want to create at any given point. Then you hit finish, and everything starts happening in the background for you. Once this wizard finishes, that LUN is ready to present out into your servers for you to start taking advantage of the capacity on the StorTrends SAN here. We do pop up our timeout settings, recommendations. Every time you create a volume, kind of as a reminder, hey, make sure you got these set. If none of our other best practices are followed, we really put a lot of weight on the timeout settings, and so we try to remind you as much as possible. But you don't have to create a volume just to see it. We do give you a physical copy to refer at any given point. So, but I know we're running up on time here, so I'll send it back over to Tyler real quick.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, George, for that awesome demo, and I want to thank everybody for participating in the event today. We're right here at the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and let you guys go. Once again, it is an absolute pleasure presenting to you. If you do have any questions after the event, feel free to reach out to us via StorTrends.com. There's a quote generator on there if you'd like pricing. There's the IData tool like Todd talked about earlier, as well as, if you're just not quite sure exactly what you're looking for just yet, you just maybe want a little bit of additional information on storage or whatever, feel free to hit up the Contact Us form, and we'll reach out to you, via that form. But other than that, again, really appreciate everyone's time this afternoon, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.